She had been married for just 39 days when she was found hanging from her own bedroom door. An iron cord twisted around her neck. Laundry scattered across the floor. Silence where love should have been. Police looked at one person immediately. Her husband. But the truth was far darker. Because for 18 years, the real killer lived freely. Until a single drinking straw left behind in a Chili's restaurant exposed everything. This is the murder of Cheryl Lynn Hall. This is Cold Case Crimes. Before we begin, if you're drawn to true crime stories where justice takes decades, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We tell the stories that refuse to stay buried. And leave a comment below. Do you think police should be allowed to collect DNA from items people leave behind in public? Now, let's go back to the beginning. Aurora, Illinois, 1979. A quiet Midwestern suburb where neighbors waved from their driveways and doors were often left unlocked. It was safe, predictable, the kind of place where tragedies weren't supposed to happen. And that's where Cheryl Hall believed her life was finally beginning. She wasn't chasing wealth. She wasn't chasing fame. All Cheryl wanted was love, a home, and a future with the man she trusted. On October 6, 1979, she stood in a white dress and said, "I do." The family watched her smile. Friends celebrated her new life. No one knew that in just over a month, that same home would become a crime scene. Chuck and Cheryl met through a mutual friend, and according to Chuck's sister Jackie, they just clicked immediately. It was the first time Cheryl had really fallen in love. She'd dated before, but Chuck was different. He was the one. All Cheryl wanted was simple: marriage, family, a life built with the man she loved. On October 6, 1979, she got her wish. The wedding was beautiful. Jackie was the flower girl, wearing a pretty dress she still remembers to this day. She'd never seen her brother smile like that. Never. The newlyweds moved into a townhome in a peaceful Aurora neighborhood. Family lived nearby. Friends visited often. Their condo was beautiful, always clean, always welcoming. Cheryl took pride in their home. She loved entertaining, hosting dinners and game nights. Life was exactly what she dreamed of. Cheryl had a routine. Every Wednesday was her day. Cleaning, laundry, just her at home taking care of their life together. Everyone knew Wednesdays were her cleaning days. She'd be home all day. It was just what she did. Wednesday, November 14th, 1979. Cheryl was alone in the townhouse she shared with her husband, Chuck. Wednesdays were her cleaning days. Laundry, vacuuming, organizing their life together. That afternoon, Chuck came home for lunch. They ate. They laughed. He kissed her goodbye. It was the last time he would ever see his wife alive. At 6 o'clock, Chuck walked back through the front door. And immediately, something felt wrong. The moment Chuck walked through the front door, something felt wrong. There was something lying by the entrance that shouldn't have been there. Laundry knocked over. He called out to Cheryl. No answer. His heart began to race. Chuck walked upstairs. At the top of the stairs, he saw her, hanging from the doorknob, an iron cord wrapped around her neck. Chuck tried to save her. He dropped to the floor, tried CPR. His hands were shaking, his voice breaking. Begging her to breathe, then he ran to the neighbor's house. The neighbor was a nurse. They called 911. Chuck continued CPR until paramedics arrived, begging his wife to breathe, to come back to him. But Cheryl was already gone. Cheryl was Garnet Bailey's daughter, her firstborn. Garnet called her Churi from the day she was born. She was always a mama's girl. Cheryl's younger sister Lisa was 4 years apart in age, but they were close, really close. Cheryl would play Barbies with Lisa even though she was older. She was protective, loving, kind. And now she was dead at just 22 years old. When someone is murdered in their own home, investigators follow a protocol, and it always starts in the same place. You have to look at the husband first. He's the closest person to the victim, and that's difficult because they're grieving, but it's where you start. Chuck wasn't just the spouse. He was the last person to see Cheryl alive. He was the one who discovered her body. He checked every box for prime suspect status. For hours, detectives questioned Chuck Hall. Again and again, they made him repeat his story, looking for inconsistencies, looking for cracks. They went over his timeline so many times. The same questions over and over. It destroyed him. He loved her more than anything. Chuck was angry, and rightfully so. In his mind, he just lost the love of his life, and the police were treating him like a criminal. His sister Jackie says it never crossed her mind that Chuck hurt Cheryl. Not once. Never. Garnet Bailey, Cheryl's mother, felt the same way. Chuck adored her daughter. Investigators checked Chuck's alibi thoroughly. Between 2:30 and 6 p.m. on the day of the murder, he was seen at multiple job sites. Coworkers confirmed it. Time cards backed it up. The evidence was clear. Chuck Hall didn't kill his wife. Detectives ruled him out and shifted focus to the crime scene itself. Forensic teams searched for fingerprints on door handles, on Cheryl's purse, on items throughout the home. But most prints were smudged, overlapping, unusable. Nothing concrete. During the autopsy, Cheryl's fingernails were clipped. Under one nail, investigators found something. A bloodstain. It wasn't Cheryl's blood. The murder weapon was something readily available, an iron cord. There was no forced entry, nothing stolen, no signs of a struggle outside the upstairs area. This wasn't a random home invasion. Investigators pieced together a timeline. Cheryl's sister Lisa spoke with her at 3 p.m. that day on the phone. Everything was normal. They chatted, laughed, made plans. At 3:30, neighbors in the adjacent apartment heard a door slam, then several loud thuds. At 6 p.m., Chuck came home and found her. So between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., someone entered that townhouse. Someone Cheryl likely knew, someone she let inside. The neighborhood had been experiencing break-ins for weeks. Could this have been a burglary gone wrong? The initial theory was that someone broke in to burglarize the home and encountered Cheryl, but the evidence didn't support that. The Halls had recently installed a deadbolt on their front door. That deadbolt was intact. Nothing appeared disturbed downstairs. No valuables were missing. No jewelry taken. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal. During their investigation, detectives kept hearing one name over and over: Larry Galloway. Larry worked at the same cable company as Chuck. He and Cheryl had gone to high school together. The four of them, Larry, his wife, Chuck, and Cheryl, they'd socialize sometimes. Casual friends. But Cheryl always thought Larry was a little off, a little strange. 2 weeks before Cheryl's murder, something happened that made her deeply uncomfortable. Larry Galloway showed up at the Hall's residence while Chuck was at work. He stayed approximately 20 minutes. Cheryl was disturbed enough by this unexpected visit that she told a friend about it afterward. Something about it didn't sit right with her. When police questioned Galloway about this visit, he had an explanation. He claimed he was there to discuss union business. Chuck was a union steward at the cable company, and Larry said he needed to talk about union matters. But there was more to the story. Larry had been fired from his job at the cable company once before, and Chuck, through the union, was able to save his position. Larry got his job back, but there was another time when Chuck couldn't save Larry's job. He was fired again, and this time it stuck. Could that be motive? Revenge against the union steward who couldn't save his job the second time. Detectives asked Galloway about his whereabouts the day of the murder, during those critical hours between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. He said he was at his parents' home mowing the grass. No witnesses, no proof, just his word against the evidence. They couldn't get anything concrete from Galloway, and without physical evidence directly linking him to the scene, They had no choice but to move on to other leads. But Galloway's name kept surfacing. Again and again. People who knew him, people who worked with him, kept mentioning his name to investigators. Several people connected to the case were asked to take polygraph tests, standard procedure. Larry Galloway declined, and from that point forward he ceased all cooperation with the investigation. He stopped answering questions, stopped returning calls. He went silent. Once Larry refused to cooperate and Chuck was ruled out as a suspect, that's where the case hit a wall. A hard wall that seemed impossible to break through. For Cheryl's family, that wall felt insurmountable. It was eating at Garnet Bailey, Cheryl's mother, every single day. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't think about anything else. Her daughter's killer was walking free. Garnet did something most parents in her position would never do. She picked up the phone and called Larry Galloway directly. She told him, "Larry, you're going to get what's coming to you one day." And Larry Galloway said something that would haunt her forever. He said, "Bring it on." Then he hung up. Garnet described it as an explosion inside her. He didn't care. He just didn't care what happened to Cheryl. Years passed. 1 year became 5, 5 became 10. The case went cold, but the family never stopped fighting. They felt backed into a corner with no options left. Then in 1997, something changed. DNA technology began to evolve. Testing that didn't exist in 1979 was now possible, advanced, reliable. That bloodstain under Cheryl's fingernail, it could finally be tested properly. But there was one problem. They needed a DNA sample from Larry Galloway, and he refused to give one. Prosecutors took an unusual step. They brought the case before a grand jury, which issued a subpoena ordering Galloway to provide a DNA sample. It was a legal maneuver designed to compel cooperation. Galloway's lawyers fought back hard. They appealed the order to a judge, arguing that forcing their client to provide DNA without sufficient evidence was unconstitutional. And the judge ruled in Galloway's favor. The judge determined there was insufficient evidence to compel Larry Galloway to provide a DNA sample. He got away with it. Again. Garnet Bailey remembers thinking, "If I could just get my hands on you." Lisa Martinez, Cheryl's sister, said their hopes were shattered, completely shattered. Chuck Hall, Cheryl's widower, tried to move on with his life. He remarried. He had 2 sons. He loved those boys with all his heart, but the trauma never left him. Jackie believes her brother suffered from PTSD. He would start crying out of nowhere for no apparent reason. In the back of his mind, this terrible thing was always there, haunting him, following him through every moment of his new life. 18 years passed, 18 long years. Larry Galloway was a free man living his life. Cheryl's family had no justice, no answers, no closure. And then everything changed. If this case has you hooked, type "still here" in the comments, because what happens next is what finally cracks the case open. 2007, nearly 3 decades after Cheryl Hall's murder, a new investigator took a fresh look at the cold case file. Someone determined to find answers no matter how long it took. Jackie Stiles, Chuck's sister, Cheryl's sister-in-law, was now a police officer with 10 years of law enforcement experience, and she had never forgotten what happened to her brother's wife. In her mind, there was only one person who knew what happened that day: Larry. If they couldn't legally compel Galloway to give DNA through the courts, maybe they didn't have to. Jackie had an idea, a clever, perfectly legal idea. Jackie and her team set up surveillance on Larry Galloway's home. They sat there in an unmarked car, watching, waiting. 2.5 hours passed. Finally, Galloway left his residence with another man and drove to a Chili's restaurant. The team followed at a distance, maintaining visual contact the entire time. They watched as Galloway went inside, sat down, ordered food. They watched him eat his meal, completely unaware he was being observed, and then they waited some more. After Galloway finished his meal and left the restaurant, The team moved in quickly. They went straight to his table and collected his straw, his utensils, his napkin, everything he'd touched and left behind. It's called abandoned DNA. Once someone leaves an item in a public place, they no longer have an expectation of privacy over that item. Police can legally collect it without a warrant. It's been used in countless cold cases across the country. The straw was sent to the lab for testing. And then came the moment the family had been waiting 18 years for. The DNA swabbed from that straw matched the bloodstain found under Cheryl Hall's fingernails. This was the break the case needed. This was what the family had been waiting for 18 agonizing years. Armed with an arrest warrant, investigators approached Larry Galloway at his home and placed him under arrest for the murder of Cheryl Lynn Hall. Jackie said Larry had no emotional reaction whatsoever. He didn't ask questions. He didn't protest. She told him the warrant was for murder. And he just put his hands behind his back, very compliant, very calm. Hours later, detectives interrogated Galloway in a small room at the police station. They laid out the evidence, the timeline, the DNA match, everything they had, and Larry Galloway showed no remorse. None. Jackie and her fellow investigators knew without a doubt they had the right guy. But even with DNA evidence, prosecutors faced challenges. There were obstacles. The volume of DNA recovered from the crime scene was an issue. Some of it was degraded after so many years. This was a case built entirely on DNA, so any inconsistency was a major concern. If they went to trial and lost, Galloway would walk free forever. Double jeopardy would prevent them from ever trying him again. Rather than risk losing at trial, prosecutors made a strategic decision. They would resolve the case through a plea agreement, hold him as accountable as they could based on the evidence they had. Garnet Bailey, Cheryl's mother, supported the decision. She said they took the plea deal because they weren't gamblers. Justice for Cheryl wasn't worth gambling on. The risk was too high. As part of the plea agreement, Larry Galloway had to do one thing. He had to admit in open court that he murdered Cheryl Hall. He had to say the words out loud. But he didn't have to say why. He didn't have to explain his motive. He didn't have to give the family the answers they desperately wanted. Garnet Bailey asked the question that still haunts her. Why would you do that to her? Why would you hurt her? If I could just know why, maybe I could live with it a little better. But Larry Galloway never answered. He took his reasons to prison with him. The family thought they finally had some measure of closure. Galloway was behind bars. Cheryl's name was cleared of any suggestion of suicide. The world knew what really happened. Then they got a call that shattered them all over again. They were told Larry Galloway was out of jail, released early, and Garnet couldn't understand it. How could he be out? He hasn't even served 5 years for taking my daughter's life. Just months later, the family faced another heartbreak. Chuck Hall, Cheryl's widower, lost his battle with cancer. He had been fighting it for several years, and his body finally gave out. Jackie said her brother died knowing the world knew he wasn't a murderer. That brought him peace. And it brought her peace too. Losing him was so incredibly hard. But she knew he was finally with Cheryl again, with the love of his life. Cheryl Hall was just 22 years old when her life was stolen from her. A newlywed with her entire future ahead of her. Dreams of children, of growing old with the man she loved. All of it taken away in a violent, senseless act. For 18 years, her killer walked free, living his life while her family suffered in silence, haunted by questions and the absence of justice. But a family's determination, a sister-in-law's refusal to give up, and a discarded straw at a restaurant finally brought the truth to light. Larry Galloway took Cheryl's life, but he couldn't take her memory. He couldn't silence the people who loved her. He couldn't erase the impact she had on everyone who knew her. Cheryl Lynn Hall mattered. Her life mattered, and her story will not be forgotten. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think abandoned DNA collection should be used more often in cold cases? Should there be limits on how police can gather evidence, even from items left in public? Where do we draw the line between justice and privacy? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. These are complex questions, and I genuinely want to know what you think. And if you think this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear what happened in our next case. A woman disappeared without a trace for 15 years. When she finally returned, what she told police about where she'd been would change everything we thought we knew about her disappearance. Subscribe to Cold Case Crimes for more stories like this, cases that will keep you thinking long after the video ends. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching, for honoring Cheryl's memory, and for standing with families still searching for justice. This is Cold Case Crimes, and we'll see you in the next one.